After the Second World War, the United States was indisputably the economically and militarily most powerful country in the world. And it pretty much maintained that status for the next 50 odd years, from 45 to certainly up to 95. And one could argue after 9/11, yeah, it still had that muscle. Not just the military part of it, of course, but the industrial part of it. But really starting around 9/11, 2001, and certainly over the next couple of decades, the United States economy has seriously deteriorated, as has its actual military power. It spends a whole bunch of money on the military, but it has relatively little to show for it because the kind of war that the United States got involved in over the decades after 9/11 were these, basically guerrilla insurgencies. At this time, the United States, NATO, cannot engage with the Russians, militarily speaking. And economically, China is way ahead of it. Perhaps nominally, insofar as dollars to dollars, GDP, the United States might be ahead, but certainly in terms of purchasing power parity, China is far and away the larger economy, the richer nation. And yesterday we had the foreign trade deficit. The trade deficit was over $100 billion in a single month. The United States is going bankrupt. The United States is no longer number one. And when you start to look at the policies that the United States has been pursuing over the last, certainly the last 7 years, and perhaps as far back as 10, 12 years ago, the United States has been pursuing a policy not of raising itself up to remain number one, but rather of pulling everybody down. And if you look at it from that point of view, that kind of model, then a lot of the behavior of the United States makes a hell of a lot of sense. You start to realize that America's behavior in terms of creating chaos everywhere it goes, to destroy rather than to build, it's a deliberate strategy to keep the world down. And its use of its military, of its aircraft carrier battle groups, to scare people into spending more money on the military. And that's certainly the case with Russia, and it's certainly the case with China. Both of those countries have spent an enormous amount of their GDP on the military, not because they really wanted to, but because the United States kept poking them, trying to get the Russian and Chinese economies to malinvest into their military to protect themselves from American aggression. Because everything that the United States has been doing over the last 10, 15 years has been aggressive towards all the nations of the rest of the world. The United States is, in essence, a threat to the rest of the world because it perceives the rest of the world as a threat to its own hegemony. The United States wants to remain number one, America number one, no matter what. And if that means creating chaos and destruction and misery in the rest of the world, if this means having thousands, potentially millions of people die so that the establishment in Washington can remain on the throne of the most powerful nation in the world, well, those people in Washington will do so. They will carry out policies that will ensure catastrophe. The United States has finally admitted, in the voice of Lloyd Austin, its Secretary of Defense, that the U.S. is engaged in a proxy war with Russia. They've admitted it openly. I mean, it's something that, when I said this 8 weeks ago, I was a Russian bot. I was a Putin stooge. And now, they're admitting it openly. They're admitting openly that they are engaged in a proxy war that will not benefit the Ukrainian people. And in fact, their openly stated objective is to pull down Russia. See? Because rather than the United States trying to elevate itself, make its cities beautiful and prosperous, make its people healthy and confident in the future, the American leadership no longer tries to do that. It no longer tries to elevate the United States. Rather, it seeks to pull down the rest of the world. And they have said openly that their plan with this proxy war in Ukraine is to pull down Russia. America, well, Vladimir Putin has called the United States the empire of lies. Other people have also called it the empire of chaos. The United States does lie all the time, and it does inflict chaos wherever it goes. But you have to understand why. And once you understand why, it becomes incredibly easy to identify what they're doing and incredibly predictable. The United States, the leaders of the United States, do not have the imagination or the intellect or the drive to try to raise up America, make it better. I mean, you could say that Trump tried with his, Make America Great Again logo, but it was just a logo. It was just a slogan. Mm-hmm. They never actually made America great. No, they didn't. And in fact, one could argue that Trump, with his policies, his aggressive policies towards China, his exiting the intermediate range ballistic missile treaty in Europe, all that just created more chaos. Again, rather than trying to elevate the United States, they tried to drag everybody down. Mm-hmm. And that seems to be what the United States is doing. And so if you look at America's actions through that lens, everything becomes very clear. And you realize, too, that what American leaders are terrified of is actually having to put American economic power, American military power to the test. Because they know that if that economic power, if that military power is actually put to the test, it will fail. Because the bottom line is that the United States is a failed empire. And we are watching as it goes down the tubes.